Pastor Ron Jetter, Immanuel Lutheran Church, Grandview, Washington. It is the 4th of July holiday observed, Friday, July 3rd, 2020. The choice is how we manifest our inner goodness, says Luther in his treatise on Christian liberty. That is to say, in his words, a Christian being consecrated by our faith does good works, but we are not by these works made a more holy person or more a Christian. How then does the faith which is within us guide us in our daily lives? Imagine a group of people who believe they have been oppressed, denied rights, who take to the streets, who in some cases damage property, in some cases lives are lost. They damage property that symbolizes a government they no longer believe in or respect. They demand, and their demands are met not with an invitation for dialogue, but with guns, armies, tanks, and so on. And individuals then have to choose. Do I stay on the sideline and watch? How do I feel about this? Do I join in the protests, join in the battle against injustice? Or do I say it's treason? Or do I say it's not a winnable battle? Is it a pragmatic matter? Is it a patriotic matter? Well, a group of people had to act. They could no longer stay silent. They could no longer remain under the thumb of tyranny. The tyrant's name was King George III of England, and by all historical accounts, he wasn't really that bad of a guy. It's just that the American colonies were his property. American people were his subjects. And subjects didn't just get attitude and act like they had individual liberty and individual freedom. But the subjects didn't agree. They believed that God had given them not just Christian liberty, but that Christian liberty created within them a desire for personal liberty and national liberty. And over 200 years ago then, they fought the war that produced the United States of America. They were traitors. They committed treason. They damaged government property. They killed in order to win the justice that they cried out for, the rights that they had demanded. So when people gather today in the streets saying, we need equal justice, we need equal rights, well, there's historical precedent for it. That's how our nation was founded, and that's why we have that First Amendment that says people have the right to gather. And each of us as Christians then have to decide in our own conscience, how am I going to be involved? Luther goes on to say, good works do not make a good person, but a good person does good works. Bad works do not make a bad person, but a bad person does bad works. Okay, so you may or may not agree with what's going on today in the streets with the demands for the blacks to have equal justice. From 1944 to 1968, 1.2 million black veterans who fought in World War II were denied unemployment benefits, denied housing, denied loans, denied access. They couldn't get on golf courses because they were all white country clubs. They couldn't do a number of things, mortgages, etc. They couldn't go to school and have the GI Bill pay for that college. And so a generation got left behind, and they materially withered, while my dad, who took advantage of the GI Bill, took advantage of the VA loan program, prospered and owned his own home. It was paid for, earned enough to leave me an inheritance. Now, I'm by no means wealthy, but I am better off than that generation whose dads were denied that. In '68, the whole movement about civil unrest and equal rights came about, and so the civil rights movement changed laws at that point. But it didn't change attitudes. Attitudes come down to what kind of person we decide to be. Do I want to be a good person? And what does that mean? Now, if I'm a good person in my own eyes, does that make me a good person in your eyes? Not necessarily. It's one of those things. As Luther says, we are saint and we are sinner. So when we have convictions or beliefs, humility would dictate that we recognize that others have contrary opinions and convictions and belief, and that theirs are just as valid as ours. A friend of mine the other day was talking about something, and he says, now, am I crazy here or am I right? And I had to say, it's not about being right or wrong. I look at things the way I do because of the path I've taken. I have a set of experiences that include my prejudices, the times where I've been proud of what I've done, the times when I probably could or should have done things different, words that I would take back, words that I would stand by. I would say that's typical of every human being. This coming Sunday, 2 days from now, we're going to hear Paul from Romans chapter 7 talking about this. And that chapter was foundational to Luther's understanding of what a Christian does in his or her civic life. Paul will say, I don't do the things that I know I should do, and I do things I know I shouldn't. That's as much of the lesson that I'll give you. So back to Luther. It is certainly true that in the sight of people, one becomes good or evil by our works. But here, becoming means that it is thus shown and recognized who is good or evil, as Christ said, by their fruits. You will know them, Matthew 7:20. But all this stops at appearances and externals. That is to say, my opinion of what's good and what's evil is nothing more than my opinion. And my opinion is the opinion of a sinful person. My convictions are the convictions of a sinful person, doing the best I can to make a choice while recognizing that there are others who make different choices. Some of the people in our nation are protecting the Second Amendment to the Constitution, believing that the right to bear arms comes from the very foundation, the very acts by which we won our freedom on July 4th and during the years that followed that, back in 1776 to 1789. It wasn't won overnight, that's for sure. And others say, but those weapons in the hands of individuals are killing children. This is about saving lives, being pro-life. And then there's that other amendment that says a woman has a right to an abortion. And some will say, but you're killing innocents. This is about pro-life, about saving lives. And both sides say it's about saving the lives of the innocent, and yet they tend to not want to talk to one another. As a saint, I want to be about reconciling. As a sinner, I can't afford to be dragged into either side and become so entrenched in anybody's political, temporary world position that will pass away that I lose my ability to recognize Christ as my God. Even in our Pledge of Allegiance, they say one nation under God, but I fear for too many people it has become one God under nation. that it is party before principle. And the principle Luther will drive at is that our faith is the root, the trunk, and the tree. That's solid. That's grounded in Christ and Christ alone, fed by Christ alone. And that the fruits of that tree are the worldly manifestations of that. And sometimes fruits have worms or blemishes, or they can rot if they get too ripe. So fruit isn't all it's cracked up to be. Fruit can freeze, and then the buds fall off before they have a chance to grow into full cherries, as we well know. Liberty is a messy thing. It really is. Some will say it's all about personal responsibility. Well, that's true. Each of us has to use our personal liberty in this world in ways that are responsible. And Luther would say that if Christ dwells within us by faith, that we will want to use our personal liberty in ways that reconcile. See you tomorrow. Happy Eve of 4th of July.